Canada's lifeline to the global economy is under siege, and the warning signs are glaring. What if I told you that China just dropped the hammer on one of Canada's most vital exports? And what if I told you things are about to get ugly, not just for the government, but for farmers, consumers, and manufacturers alike? The tensions between Canada and China didn't erupt overnight. This is the result of years of escalating political and economic friction. At the core of this trade war is Canada's 2018 arrest of Huawei's CFO Meng Wanzhou, a move that triggered a series of retaliatory actions from China. The political backlash evolved into a full-blown economic conflict that is now impacting everything from technology to agriculture. Financial Times reported that since Meng's arrest, China has been tightening the screws on Canada's exports, and trade between the two nations dropped by 20% in 2023. What started as diplomatic tension has morphed into an economic battlefield, with both nations taking severe hits. China, one of Canada's largest trading partners, accounted for over $30 billion in bilateral trade in 2022. But the stakes are much higher now, as the two countries fight not only over market share, but also over political dominance. It's not just about canola, says Robert Johnston, an expert at the Eurasia Group. This is part of China's broader strategy to assert itself globally and punish countries that challenge its authority. If you are enjoying our content, please hit the like button. To help us even more, please leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments. Your engagement helps us grow. Thank you. On September 9, 2024, China initiated an anti-dumping investigation into Canadian canola imports, accusing Canada of selling its crops below market value. Canola is not just any crop. It's a $30 billion industry that directly impacts Canadian farmers and the economy. In 2022 alone, 75% of Canada's canola exports, a staple in products like cooking oil and animal feed, went to China. China's claims of dumping aren't just economic, they're strategic. By accusing Canada of undercutting global prices, China puts pressure on its trade partner at a time when both nations are struggling with inflation and supply chain disruptions. According to the South China Morning Post, China's investigation is widely seen as politically motivated, with experts noting that the anti-dumping probe was launched shortly after Canada imposed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. This is a classic case of retaliatory politics, said David McNaughton, Canada's former ambassador to the US. China knows how vital the canola market is to Canada, and they're using it as a lever. The consequences of China's investigation are dire for Canadian farmers. Canola prices have plummeted by 30%, dropping from $900 per ton to less than $600 in just a few months. This has devastated the livelihoods of thousands of farmers who depend on the crop to support their families. According to the Globe and Mail, canola prices are now at their lowest point in over a decade, and Canadian farmers are scrambling to make up for the loss. John Stevens, a canola farmer from Saskatchewan, says he's never seen anything like this. We were already dealing with high fertilizer costs and rising labor expenses. And now this. It feels like we're being squeezed from every direction. Stevens isn't alone. Across Canada, thousands of farmers are grappling with the financial fallout, and the government is under immense pressure to provide aid. The Canadian Federation of Agriculture has urged Ottawa to negotiate with Beijing and offer subsidies to farmers, but experts say this is only a temporary fix. Statistics Canada estimates that the canola industry could lose up to $1.5 billion in revenue this year alone. The root of this trade war can be traced back to Canada's decision to slap tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. In 2022, the Canadian government imposed a 10% tariff on Chinese EV imports, And on October 1st, 2024, Canada will slap a full 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, claiming that China's state-subsidized auto industry is creating unfair competition for Canadian manufacturers. But this not just about cars. It was about protecting key industries that employ tens of thousands of Canadians. Canada is home to major automotive players like Magna International and Linamar, both of which have struggled to compete against the flood of low-cost EVs from China. According to CBC News, Canadian automakers saw their market share shrink by 15% in 2022, while Chinese EV manufacturers experienced explosive growth. This imbalance spurred Canadian auto executives to lobby the government for protectionist policies. "We were at a tipping point," said Sarah McKinnon, a spokesperson for the Canadian Auto Workers Union. "If the government hadn't stepped in, we would have lost tens of thousands of jobs." Trudeau's administration ultimately enacted the tariff as a defensive measure, but it quickly backfired, triggering China's retaliatory actions. Local manufacturers have long been sounding the alarm about Chinese products undercutting Canadian goods. For years, Chinese imports, ranging from electronics to machinery, have been sold at prices 25 to 40% lower than domestic equivalents, according to a 2023 report from the Canadian Manufacturing Coalition. These low-cost imports have forced Canadian companies to lay off workers and scale back production, as Chinese products continue to flood the market. Industries like automotive, electronics, and steel are particularly vulnerable. According to the Financial Post, Canadian steel manufacturers have experienced a 10% drop in demand over the past 3 years, as cheaper Chinese imports take over the market. With profit margins shrinking, local manufacturers are putting more pressure on the government to introduce stronger protectionist measures. "Our jobs are at stake," says Mark Wilson, CEO of a Canadian manufacturing firm. "We can't compete with China on price, so we need the government to level the playing field." But as the trade war intensifies, the cost of protectionism is becoming increasingly apparent. China's decision to target canola is not just about economics, it's about power. By crippling one of Canada's largest export industries, China is sending a clear message: challenge us, and we'll hit you where it hurts. Canola is vital to Canada's economy, generating $30 billion annually and employing tens of thousands of farmers. According to the South China Morning Post, China's move is a calculated attempt to pressure Canada into reversing its tariffs on Chinese goods. By launching an anti-dumping investigation into canola, China is exploiting a vulnerability in Canada's agricultural sector. "It's a strategic strike," says Chen Liu, an expert in Chinese trade policies. By hitting canola, China is making it clear that trade wars have consequences. Once China launched its investigation into Canadian canola, the global commodity markets responded immediately. Canola prices, which had been relatively stable, plummeted to their lowest levels in years. Bloomberg reported that canola prices dropped from $900 per ton to below $600 within weeks of the investigation announcement, wiping billions off the market's value. For farmers who depend on canola to support their operations, the price drop is devastating. "We've seen a 30% decline in canola prices, and it's only getting worse," said James McDonald, a market analyst with AgriTrends. "This isn't just a local issue, it's affecting the entire global supply chain." The ripple effects of this trade war are hitting Canadians on multiple fronts. Farmers, already grappling with rising production costs, are now facing lower prices for their crops. According to the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, 25% of Canadian farmers are expected to experience significant financial hardship if the trade war with China continues into 2025. But it's not just farmers who are feeling the pain. Canadian consumers are also bearing the brunt, as tariffs on Chinese goods lead to higher prices for everyday items like electronics, appliances, and vehicles. CBC reports that inflation in Canada, already at a 40-year high, could increase by another 1 to 2% as a direct result of the tariffs. This trade war is hurting Canadians where it matters most, in their wallets, said John Smith, a senior economist at BMO Financial Group. But shockingly, Canada isn't the only target. China has also launched investigations into imports of pork, dairy, and even brandy from the European Union. Why? Because this isn't just about trade. This is about reshaping the global economic order. China's trade tactics are a calculated strategy to assert dominance in global trade. By investigating products from the EU, Beijing is warning its trading partners. Any attempt to challenge China's influence could bring painful consequences. This is trade warfare. Plain and simple. And it's not just Canada and the EU. Every nation dealing with China is watching this play out, said Chen Liu, trade policy expert. So, what's Ottawa doing about this? The Canadian government is scrambling to react. The Prime Minister's office has been under intense pressure to negotiate with Beijing, but let's face it, Canada's options are limited. This isn't a negotiation table, it's a chessboard. Canada is caught between a rock and a hard place. China is too big to ignore, but Ottawa has to find a way to stand its ground. David McNaughton, former ambassador to the US. The government has rolled out emergency subsidies to try and keep farmers afloat, but those are band-aid solutions. Farmers know it. Ottawa knows it. And Beijing, they're playing the long game. We hope you are enjoying this video. We're thrilled to have you with us today. If our content struck a chord or sparked some inspiration, go ahead and smash that like button and hit subscribe to join our awesome community. Your support is super valuable and helps us grow. Stick around and check out another video from our channel, which is now on the screen.